Your wedding date is canceled, my mom texted. Your brother scheduled his engagement party the same day. I stared at my phone and I reread it twice. Then I did something that apparently shocked my entire family. I wrote back, "That is fine." 18 months of planning, contracts, deposits, and vendor meetings, all squeezed in between intense project deadlines at my architecture firm. My fiance and I had put down $150,000 of our own money, and my mom was telling me our wedding day had been canceled, like it was a doctor's appointment she could just reschedule for flu season. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. The response, "That is fine," was not a surrender. It was a tactical withdrawal before the siege. In the world of architecture, we have a term called structural integrity. My family's version of it had been crumbling for decades, and that text message was simply the final, decisive crack. Anger was not loud this time. It was clinical. I did not cry. I did not ask why. I just sat in my home office with the blue light of my monitor reflecting off my glasses, and I started clicking. I logged into my wedding management portal. I contacted our security detail for the Santa Barbara estate we had rented for the weekend. I gave them one simple instruction. The list of authorized attendees had been revised. I changed every administrative password for the caterer, the florist, and the transportation company. This was not an emotional outburst. It was an audit. For 34 years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family. I had been the one providing the emotional and financial scaffolding that kept them upright. Now, I realized it was not a relationship at all. It was a high-interest subscription service, and I was canceling the plan effective immediately. If they wanted to use June 12th for Cameron's engagement party, they were more than welcome to. But they would be doing it without my venue, my $150,000 catering, and my blessing. My parents assumed that because I was the reliable one, my life remained infinitely rearrangeable to suit my brother's whims. They were not shocked by what they had done, they were only shocked that I had stopped playing along. By 12:03 a.m., the retaliation was complete. I did not answer a single one of their subsequent pings. I went back to my spreadsheets. Inside, my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. I sat back in my leather chair, and the silence of the room was punctuated only by the distant hum of the Santa Barbara coast. I stared at the booking confirmation for my honeymoon in the Maldives. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. This was not revenge. This was accounting. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon a shred of regret, but there was only clarity. My brother Cameron had always been special. But as of tonight, his special status was no longer my expense. I stared at the silence of my phone for the next hour. No one replied. In my family, my resistance was the only thing that gave them a sense of direction. When I stopped pushing back, they lost their compass. My mother, Amanda, and my father, Gregory, had spent decades perfecting the art of expecting the impossible from me while providing the bare minimum for my brother, Cameron. It started when I was 24. Cameron had decided he was the next big thing in the tech world. He moved to San Francisco, rented a luxury apartment he could not afford, and burned through $50,000 of my parents' retirement fund in 6 months. When the creditors started calling, it was not Cameron who answered. It was me. I was a junior architect then, living on cold brew and overtime. I handed over $20,000, my entire emergency fund, to keep him out of court. My mother's only response was, "He is just a dreamer, Rachel. You are the one with the steady hands." Then there was the house. Gregory's construction firm had hit a legal wall 4 years ago. They were weeks away from losing the Santa Barbara property they had called home for 30 years. I did not just look at the paperwork, I took over the title. I refinanced the debt under my name, becoming the legal owner of the roof over their heads while letting them live there for free. I was the silent partner in their survival, the one who kept the lights on while Cameron found himself on spiritual retreats that I ended up footing the bill for. Looking back, I can see how the trap of cruel normalization was set. In psychology, there is a dangerous phenomenon where abnormal exploitation becomes the standard operating procedure. When you perform the role of the savior once, The family stops seeing your effort as a gift and starts seeing it as a recurring payment they are entitled to. My parents did not think they were being cruel when they texted me to cancel my wedding. They genuinely believed that my life, my money, and my milestones were just communal assets to be liquidated whenever Cameron needed a boost. The more I solved their problems, the more they depersonalized me. I was not a daughter to them anymore. I was a high-yield savings account that did not charge interest. My reliability had become my own cage. Because I was strong, my pain was considered non-existent. Because I was successful, my $150,000 investment in my own happiness was viewed as a surplus that Cameron could just annex. I realized then that I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy a seat at a table that was already sold to my brother. I had been footing the bill for a family that did not even recognize my presence unless I was holding a checkbook. But that was the old Rachel. The Rachel of 12:03 a.m. had finally looked at the balance sheet and realized the return on investment for this family was zero. And as any good architect knows, when the foundation is this rotten, you do not try to patch the cracks. You clear the site. Rachel, are you there? My mother's voice chirped through the speakerphone. It was 10 a.m. on Wednesday. She sounded entirely too cheerful for a woman who had just tried to incinerate 18 months of my life. She did not lead with an apology. She led with a proposal. Since you are being so understanding about the date, your father and I were thinking it would be such a waste to let all those deposits go to the caterer. Cameron and Sierra really loved that lobster and truffle menu you picked. Since you have already paid the $150,000 in full, we think it is only fair that you transfer the contract to them. I did not blink. I did not even stop sketching the floor plan I was working on. You want me to gift Cameron a $150,000 wedding feast for his engagement party? I asked. My voice was as flat as a marble countertop. It is not a gift, honey. It is a contribution to the family. My father, Gregory, chimed in. I could hear him shuffling papers in the background. Sierra's family is very influential. They need to see that Cameron comes from a family of stability. If you just give him the password to log into the catering portal and the floral designer, it will save the family a fortune. Consider it your wedding gift to them. I set my pencil down. The audacity was so thick I could almost taste it. They were not asking, they were auditing my generosity. To them, my hard work was just a resource they had not finished extracting. The passwords have been changed, I said, and the contracts are still in my name. I will not be transferring so much as a single shrimp, let alone a menu worth $150,000. The transition from sweet mother to indignant jailer happened in 3 seconds. Rachel, how can you be so selfish? Amanda hissed. You have so much. You have the firm, the condo, the success. Cameron is finally trying to build something, and you are hoarding a menu for a wedding that isn't even happening on that day anymore. You are being spiteful. Your own brother is starting his life, and you are worried about paperwork? Hoarding? I repeated. The word felt ridiculous. I am protecting my assets. This is not family business. This is a commercial contract I signed with my own money. If Cameron wants lobster, he can use the money he is spending on Sierra's leased Mercedes. You are a cold woman, Rachel, my father muttered. We raised you to be a leader, not someone who pinches pennies. After everything we have done for you, is this how you treat us? Over a party? Everything they had done for me. It was a phantom list they kept in a locked drawer. I did not remind him that I owned the deed to the house he was currently standing in. I did not remind him about the $20,000 I had burned to keep Cameron out of a jail cell. I just let the silence sit there, heavy and expensive. They were not shocked by my cruelty. They were shocked that the ATM had finally started asking for a PIN they did not have. I did not engage with their emotional blackmail. As an architect, I know that when a structure is beyond repair, you do not argue with the rubble, you clear the site. I stopped answering their calls and instead made a single, focused phone call to my attorney. For years, I had been the family's crisis manager, performing legal and financial miracles for free. Now, I was hiring someone to build a wall they could not climb. This was not family business anymore. It was accounting with lethal precision. My attorney and a forensic accountant began a deep audit of every contribution I had made over the last decade. We looked at the title to the Santa Barbara house, the refinancing documents, and the $20,000 I had used to settle Cameron's San Francisco debts. I realized my compassion had been a non-performing asset that they had been raiding for years. I drafted a formal notice. It was not a text, it was a legal document served by a professional. The letter informed my parents that, as the sole legal owner of the property, I was initiating a formal review of their occupancy. I was not evicting them yet, but the days of living for free while demanding my wedding assets were over. I also sent a notice to Cameron, giving him 30 days to initiate a repayment plan for the $20,000 in personal loans I had covered to keep him out of court. You cannot be serious. Cameron texted me 2 hours after he was served at a lifestyle photo shoot he was conducting at a rented pool. You are suing your own brother for $20,000? We are family, Rachel. Family does not send process servers to work. I replied with the same 3 words I had used for my wedding cancellation. That is fine, because it was. It was fine for him to realize that the Bank of Rachel was closed for business. I was not just setting a boundary, I was installing a security system. In my world of blueprints and steel, there is no room for sentimentality when the foundation is compromised. While they were busy venting in their group chats, my attorney discovered a discrepancy that changed the entire nature of our conflict. My grandmother had left a $200,000 trust fund intended for my future. For years, I had assumed the money was safe, waiting for me to hit a certain age. But as the audit deepened, the numbers did not add up. There was a signature on a withdrawal slip from 2 years ago, a withdrawal of $50,000. The handwriting looked just like mine, but I had not signed a thing. My brother had not just been a burden, he was starting to look like a criminal. The professional escalation was no longer about a wedding date, it was about a felony. The audit was no longer about mortgage payments or wedding deposits. It had uncovered a $200,000 hole in my reality. My grandmother had established that trust fund specifically for me, a financial safety net meant to anchor my future and honor her legacy. My attorney sat across from me in a sterile, glass-walled office, sliding a heavy manila folder across the desk. Inside was the smoking gun, a bank withdrawal slip for exactly $200,000 dated 6 months ago. The signature on the document was a masterpiece of deception. It looked exactly like mine, the same precise slant, the same sharp cross on the T, and the same practiced flourish I used when signing off on multi-million-dollar blueprints. But I had not signed a single thing. I had not even accessed that account in over a year. I looked at the digital scans provided by the forensic accountant. The paper trail was as clear as a floor plan. We tracked the funds directly from my liquidated trust to a high-end jeweler in Santa Barbara. The $200,000 of my inheritance had been converted into a 5-carat diamond ring for Sierra. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. This was not a family drama or a misunderstanding between siblings. This was a felony. My brother had not just been a burden or a dreamer. He was a thief who had stolen my future to buy his way into Sierra's shallow world. I called my mother immediately. I did not yell. I did not ask why. I simply stated the facts with lethal precision. Cameron forged my signature and stole $200,000 from my trust fund, I said. I have the bank records, I have the receipts from the jeweler, and I have the security footage of him at the teller window. There was a long, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. Then came the inevitable justification. Rachel, honey, you have to understand, Amanda whispered, her voice trembling with that familiar, manipulative softness. Cameron was desperate. Sierra was going to leave him because he could not afford the lifestyle she expected. He needed to show her he was successful. He was going to pay you back as soon as his new venture took off. It is just a loan between family members. It is not a loan, Mom. It is grand larceny, I replied. My voice was stripped of every ounce of daughterly warmth. And the fact that you are defending it makes you an accomplice to the destruction of my grandmother's wishes. You have so much, Rachel, Gregory shouted in the background, his voice raw with unearned indignation. You are a successful architect. You have the firm, the condo, the life. Why can't you just let your brother have this one chance at happiness? Are you really going to destroy his life over money you were not even using? Their logic was the final structural failure of our relationship. To them, my hard work made my assets communal property, but Cameron's crimes were a private matter to be buried. They were willing to sacrifice my legal rights, my financial security, and the truth on the altar of their favorite son's ego. I realized then that I was not just dealing with a toxic family, I was dealing with a criminal enterprise disguised as a household. I hung up the phone and looked at my attorney. File the police report, I said. No more negotiations. No more being the sensible one. The professional escalation was over. This was now a criminal matter, and I was going to see it through to the final judgment. June 12th arrived with a clarity that only the Santa Barbara coast can provide. While the air at the estate was heavy with the scent of sea salt and blooming jasmine, my parents and Cameron were elsewhere. They were huddled in a cramped, budget banquet hall on the outskirts of town, the only place they could afford after I had revoked their access to my wedding accounts. Amanda had spent the morning texting me about making the best of things, still under the delusion that I was sitting at home, sensible and compliant. She was wrong. At 2 p.m., exactly the time our ceremony was scheduled to begin, I stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling glass wall overlooking the Pacific. I was not wearing the modest dress my mother had picked out to keep from upstaging Sierra. I was wearing a custom-designed architectural masterpiece of silk and lace that made me feel exactly like what I was, the owner of my own life. Ethan, looking every bit the brilliant surgeon he is, took my hands. His eyes held more genuine pride and love in one glance than my entire biological family had provided in 34 years. When we were pronounced husband and wife, the applause from our 85 carefully selected guests, the people who actually showed up for us, echoed through the canyon. It was the sound of a foundation finally being set on solid ground. At 2:30 p.m., I hit post on a single photo. It was me and Ethan, glowing in the Santa Barbara sun, with a caption that cut like a scalpel. Married on our original date, at our original venue, with our original budget. The guest list was revised to include only those who respect the sanctity of a contract and a sister's life. The fallout was instantaneous. My phone, sitting on a side table, began to vibrate so violently it nearly slid off the edge. 12 missed calls from Amanda. 7 from Gregory. A string of increasingly unhinged texts from Cameron. They had abandoned their own budget party and were racing toward the estate in a frantic 2-hour drive, fueled by a mixture of greed and panic. When they arrived at the estate gates, they did not find a welcoming committee. They found the professional security detail I had hired. I watched from the balcony as Gregory's truck screeched to a halt. He and Cameron jumped out, red-faced and screaming, demanding to be let in to stop this nonsense. The guards did not flinch. No name on the authorized list, no entry, they repeated with clinical detachment. I walked down the long driveway with my ivory train trailing behind me. I did not let them in. I stood behind the black iron bars, looking at the people who had tried to cancel my happiness like it was a minor inconvenience. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply handed a manila envelope through the bars to my father. Inside is the forensic report for the $200,000 forgery, I said, my voice as steady as a structural beam. And the formal eviction notice for the Santa Barbara house. You wanted to treat my wedding like a business transaction you could cancel. Now, I am treating our relationship like a criminal case. We are not family anymore, Cameron. We are just the plaintiff and the defendant. Goodbye. I turned and walked back toward the music and the light, leaving them standing in the dust of the driveway, finally realizing that the invisible daughter had become the only person in their world who truly held the power. The silence of the Maldives was a frequency I had not heard in 34 years. Sitting on the deck of our overwater bungalow, the only sound was the rhythmic pulse of the Indian Ocean, a stark contrast to the static of my parents' voices. My phone, which had been a source of constant anxiety, now sat on the table like a deactivated weapon. I heard through my lawyer that the criminal proceedings against Cameron were moving forward with cold efficiency. My parents were forced to liquidate their remaining assets just to cover his legal defense for the $200,000 forgery. They had spent decades choosing him over me, and now they were finally learning the true cost of that choice. On our third day, I performed the final ritual. I opened the family group chat, the one where my wedding was canceled like a minor errand, and I did not read a single word. I simply hit delete and blocked every number associated with that old life. It was not an act of anger. It was an act of architectural necessity. You cannot build something new on a site filled with toxic debris. I used the $200,000 I recovered, along with the equity from the sale of my parents' house, to establish the Structural Integrity Fund. It is a foundation that provides full scholarships and professional mentorship to young architects who are building their careers without any family support. I realize that true justice is not just the satisfaction of seeing a villain fall, it is the justice of the seed sower. It is the act of taking the resources that were meant to be stolen and using them to plant a future that the people who hurt you can never touch. By building a legacy for others, I made the actions of my family small and meaningless. I am no longer the invisible daughter or the family's backup plan. I am the architect of my own peace, surrounded by a chosen family that respects the boundaries I have worked so hard to draw. Blood might share a name, but respect shares a life. If you believe Rachel's retaliation was justified and that everyone deserves to be the architect of their own happiness, please hit the like and share buttons to spread this message of self-worth.